So welcome to our last STEM Colloquium of the semester. The STEM Colloquium is an initiative funded by the National Science Foundation as part of a Barnard Noyce Teacher Scholars Program. And it's designed to build a presence and awareness of K-12 STEM educational issues on our campus. With us today are students enrolled in the companion discussion course. Who gather usually the week following the colloquium for a more in-depth discussion of the issue, and also our wonderful speakers, and then our other guests. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about our main speaker for today. Dipak Basu has spent much of his life employing technology in humanitarian missions worldwide. He is currently the chairman and CEO of Dipak Foundation. This is a nonprofit company dedicated to improving livelihoods of rural poor in developing countries through training in information technology and entrepreneurship. And so he currently serves as chairman of Dip's board of directors. In 2001, he co-founded and served for 4 years as executive director of US-based nonprofit NetHope. This is a technology alliance of the world's largest aid agencies. And then from 1995 to 2006, he held senior management positions in product management and professional services at Cisco Systems. And so he has a lot of awards. He's a Cisco Leadership Fellow, a Reuters Fellow, and a Fellow of the Institute of Electronics and Telecommunication Engineers. And all these accomplishments are absolutely amazing. But I know Dipak best as the father of my friend and colleague, Dipak Basu, who was an amazing educator. And I still remember when Junki's parents, Dipak and Radha, came to visit us at the school where we were teaching in an after-school program. And I just remember the interest that they had in the work that she was doing in the school, in meeting the people she was working with, in meeting the students that she was working with, all the way to the Bronx they came. And I've been blessed to be involved in a very small way with keeping some of her legacy alive with the work of the Dipak Basu Foundation. And this is a foundation that her parents had established in order to continue her work. And so also with us today, we have one of Junki's former students. So Danya was a student at the School for Democracy and Leadership, and she's co-authored some papers in our science ed journals and book chapters with Junki. And she's just completed her Master's of Social Work at Columbia University. So we're going to be really excited to hear from both Dipak and Danya about a wonderful educator. And so without any further ado, I'm going to turn the floor over to you.
Thanks, Maria. Thanks, Maria. It's great to be here. I'm here not as any Cisco or NetHope or anything. I'm here as a dad and an admirer of y'all, university students, graduates who are especially working to help folks in embattled New York City schools and trying to help everybody. That's what our daughter did, help them come out and become responsible citizens. So tonight's talk is the last in your series of colloquia, and you guys have exams starting next week, I believe. So I'd like you to treat this as a nice, relaxing evening. Enjoy. It's a very inspirational story. I mean, I have a biased view, but still, it is a very inspirational story. I wrote this book. It's one of those, you stand in a line and you ask, people and the commanding officer asks for volunteers, and everybody else steps back, and you're left in front. It's that sort of situation. I have a bit of writing credentials, but this was not what I wanted to do, especially as a parent. So I've been doing, this book came out in May of 2014, coincident with Junki receiving the Early Achievement Award posthumously at Columbia Teachers College right there. And we brought it out simultaneously, more or less. And a good part of it is down here. So I'm nobody really, but this person is a somebody. And she, Jane Goodall, never met Junki, but she attended one of the events in her memory and got to like her very much. And when she agreed to write the foreword, I was blown away, literally. So the way I've been doing my readings is to read, close the book, show a slide or two, read again, and that's going to probably put you to sleep. So we're going to do this much more interactively. To start with, I'm going to show you a video which kind of summarizes her life and what follows. The incredible thing about Junki is that, and because of all her admirers, is her work, which was very, very groundbreaking, didn't stop with her and continues. So what Donia is going to talk about, and we are going to have another speaker, Kayla, who had to leave because of a family emergency. I'll fill in for them, is the legacy that she left behind, and a legacy in which all of you might be able to participate. So that's the best part of, I think, what Junki has done. So let's try this. I'm going to try this here.
Dipak Basu, teacher, scholar, mentor, explorer, fighter. Taken from us when she was just 31, Junki, as her friends and colleagues called her, left behind an impassioned vision of possibility and potential in science education.
Central to my work is the belief that in diversity of view, she gained expertise in scientific knowledge and learned to think logically, investigate original questions, and innovate in ways that fulfill needs in their lives, community, and world.
With her rigorous scholarship, innovative methods, and seemingly bottomless well of energy, not only did Junki prove her vision was attainable, she transformed and inspired both students and teachers in the process. The few people who knew Junki in her early years were surprised by her work's tremendous impact. As a Stanford undergraduate, she wasted no time in demonstrating a double talent for academic theorizing on one hand and in-the-field practice on the other. In the classroom, she studied human biology with such luminaries as Bill Durham. Working abroad, she documented howler monkeys in Nicaragua, helped bring science to South African townships as part of Physics on the Move, and wrote her thesis on the Russian street children of Moscow and St. Petersburg, a paper that received high praise from then Provost Condoleezza Rice, herself a Russian expert. Meanwhile, in nearby Palo Alto, she co-founded and developed Discover, a math and science summer program for underprivileged teenage women.
In my research, I am most interested in investigating ways in which young people from low-income minority backgrounds who are deeply underrepresented in science can gain access to a quality education in this field.
The desire to explore similar issues of social justice led Junki to New York, where she began the next chapter in her life, earning a PhD at Columbia's Teachers College, and later joining the faculty at the Department of Teaching and Learning at NYU. In her papers, she addressed the poor state of American science literacy.
Physics, in particular, has historically been reserved for quote-unquote elite students, such that most graduate from high school without any exposure to this discipline.
New York schools became a laboratory for tackling this national problem. In particular, the School for Democracy and Leadership, a charter school she helped establish, forged a mission that complemented her activism.
The vision of the school is very much tied to my research, which looks at what elements of living in a democratic society can be replicated in schools, and how democracy in schools might affect student learning and engagement in science.
Junki's work at SDL and other schools was often dramatically transformative. Her mentorship inspiring troubled and disinterested students to engage in and actively pursue science for the first time in their lives. As Fania Doucet, then my colleague, observed,
She isn't afraid to get close to teenagers and let them know she believes in them, in their dreams, in their promise. She lets them into her life and seamlessly weaves mentoring and friendship in a way that I find admirable.
now it is up to us to carry on her legacy. One forged from unflinching high standards, selfless hard work, disdain for complacency, and belief in the progressive power of critical inquiry. And the wheels are already in motion.
Good afternoon, everybody. Ready? I am officially ready for Science Ed Expo. many young people as I encounter be able to feel the same way, to be able to see themselves as scientists. Second, I'm a physicist, lyricist, spitting this ridiculousness, so witness the ignorance I dismiss since nuance flows of emotion is the thesis in this instance, insignificant is synthesis into a simple sentence.
Honestly, every year I come and I see projects that make me think, oh wow, why didn't I think of that? Why am I not doing that in my classroom?
See, every force has an opposite force, and every action has an equal plus opposite reaction.
And the nice thing about this group is a chance to see what other teachers are doing.
When I sit in the back of the class, I'm a scientist, and I fire back on the track. I'm a scientist.
We took a picture today. There's a mass of people who are committed to helping all kids learn science and learn to love science.
And the idea is that we get this kind of excitement and this engagement in as many schools as possible.
We want this to touch every school and every student in New York City.
You don't have to wait until you're old like myself to make an impact. You can do it right now. I have one thing that you all have, and that's encouraging teachers. That can make all the difference.
So that really covers Jhumki's life. You saw how it ended. Syed Expo 2014 is just a month away. So if you're in town and you want a wonderful Saturday afternoon, do join us. I'll get into that in just a bit. It is full of kids really excited about science and learning and just the kind of thing teachers and educators like. So we begin the story. I'm going to tell stories, and I think so will Dania. We begin the story on a balmy September evening in 2008. I was walking my daughter to the first fall session of the Teaching Methods course at New York University. We threaded our way through a welter of undergraduates, out enjoying the late autumn warmth on the way to classes or to dinner, blissfully chatting about exams, dinner plans, Rihanna's latest hit, dorm parties, boyfriends, dates, girlfriends. We entered NYU's Silver Center and rode a packed elevator up to the 8th floor and into a classroom. For this important day, Professor Dipak Basu wore a black blouse, faded jeans, and black and gray jacket. She was about 5 feet, slightly shorter than Maria, but she would give her a run for the money. With the end of chemotherapy, a soft sheen of hair gave her a stylish European look. She was heart-stoppingly thin. Her eyes were cavernous. This was in September 2008. I put down the heavy backpack and looked around uncertainly. "You can stay, Baba." She called me Baba. She told me, "Join the class." I subsided at a table, and soon 28 students filled the room, 29 including me. All except me were graduate students. All except me were teachers or teachers-to-be. In spite of her frailty, Jhumki stage managed the class with complete aplomb. Her bearing was straight, her voice was strong, her preparation was immaculate. I watched in disbelief as we sat around tables and drew up semester plans on customized brown paper bags, and excitedly held group discussions. After a while, I relaxed and concentrated on what was being said. I was really tense, all these students and me in there. Then I surprised myself by suggesting something about training methodology from my work experience at Cisco Systems. Everyone turned around and looked at me and paid attention. I felt accepted, talked some more, and was beginning to enjoy myself when it hit me with a shock. Democratic pedagogy. Jhumki's teaching model was actually working on me. There she was, using my funds of knowledge to lure me into what she wanted me to learn. The light bulb was still on above my head when our table became a sea of smoke. Dr. Basu had released dry ice to introduce an experiment and grinned as her students shied away from the fumes. The smoke dissipated, the discussions became debates, the teachers talked about their students and tossed forth teaching suggestions that were deftly captured on pieces of paper and stuffed into the waiting brown paper bags. No idea was lost. Everyone set goals for the class. Everyone had a good time. On that day, I joined Jumki's band of admirers and wondered, like everyone else, how does she do it? 3 months later, on a cold December night, Jumki was 15 minutes late for the final session of the same class. Her co-instructor, Dr. Vernita Johnson, had formed the 28 students into teams at 5 tables when Jumki and I walked into the room. Just as in the session I had attended earlier, energetic discussion was underway at all the tables. Vernita and several students smiled greetings at their professor. Jumki nodded back without emotion. The conversations didn't miss a beat. As I unobtrusively settled into a corner, Vernita told me that the topic of discussion for the day was the use of slang in developing relationships between students and teachers. Jumki walked over to a table. Now we're talking about December. Jumki walked over to a table, sat down, and leaned back in her chair. She appeared withdrawn and on the verge of falling asleep. I was concerned, but knew her well enough not to intrude unless asked. Then, as I watched, I realized she was listening intently to the conversation at the table and was in complete sync with her students. Knowing how her mind worked, I could imagine the gears clicking in her brain while she analyzed and correlated the circulating ideas. At a break in the conversation, she stood up, and I took a picture. So this is her last picture that was taken of her. You know, guys, she said, all this stuff's way cool, but I haven't heard anything about how a teacher can really, and I mean really, stimulate students into critical thinking. How can you get into their culture? The 6 men and women at her table looked at their professor's ashen face. They were mostly in their 20s, working towards graduate degrees in education, all current or future school teachers, all passionate and optimistic about their chosen profession, all dedicated to the difficult task of serving teenagers in marginalized neighborhoods of America. Their faces showed concern for their teacher, whose tall and gaunt figure was visibly frail, whose gray visage and sunken cheeks bore witness to unremitting pain. But there was no pity in their expressions. They knew about the cancer, and they had, from the outset, fallen in with their professor's manner of ignoring the disease. So, now having secured their attention, Jumki told the students at her table, look, I've been reading about teen dynamics. How about we try these? How about we try this? And she said something that was so politically incorrect that I can't even repeat it. It's in here. But she said something terribly incorrect politically. But when she said that, there was dead silence. Then a deluge of reaction. What? Asked an incredulous white student. Oh my God, we can't use that stuff, burst out a graying veteran of the New York City school system. Of course we can, and we do, retorted a lanky dreadlocked Jamaican with a Caribbean accent. Walk any street in Kingston, you'll see. So all of this had relevant to what Jumki said. After 10 minutes of vigorous debate, a new teacher from Detroit school said, man, you know what? You got to get real close to your kids and understand their backgrounds if you want that kind of interaction. You got to be at their level in the class. Now, throughout this exchange, Jumki had stood stiffly with a straight, almost wooden visage, but a gleam in her eyes, which broke my heart and made me want to go and hug her, betrayed the pleasure of seeing her class duel with creative ideas about student participation in their curriculum development, student participation in their own curriculum development, a mainstay of her teaching philosophy. Good conclusion, folks, she said. Keep going. This is hot stuff. And went over to another table. The class ended at 9 p.m., but no one wanted to leave without discussing his or her plans for the next semester with Dr. Basu. Jumki listened to each student's ideas and aspirations with undivided attention and offered suggestions for his or her career goals. It was 9:45 before the last student departed. Still, she would not leave and helped Vernita and me clear the debris of end of the semester, snacks, and replace chairs and tables. Walking between us along dark and freezing streets of Greenwich Village, she chatted about lesson plans for the next semester. Before saying goodbye to Vernida, she scheduled a meeting for the following Tuesday. We'll discuss learnings from this class at my office. Okay? Oh, and we'll try to make some serious improvements. I steered her carefully around a scaffolding support in the middle of the sidewalk. Or maybe we'll meet in that hospital in case they want to keep me there for some silly reason. Vernida, a science teacher from the Isaac Newton Middle School for Math and Science in Harlem, has a big laugh and an even bigger heart. She would have been stunned to know why her colleague had been delayed for class that night. Radiation treatment for breast cancer that had metastasized to Junki's brain had run late. While waiting for her mother for the X-ray machine to be set up in the radiology lab, Junki had been utterly determined. Nothing, absolutely nothing, was going to keep her away from her last class of the semester. Even blinding radiation that caused intense nausea had not fazed her after she checked out. She literally said, "I'm leaving the hotel." The doctor said, "You can't go." She said, "I'm leaving," of New York's Memorial Hospital, and her husband Alexander drove us to NYU. She had allowed me to accompany her to class and carry her backpack, heavy with the omnipresent laptop, only because dangerously high ammonia levels in her bloodstream caused her to wobble into obstacles. On the following Tuesday, December 16th, Junki missed her meeting with Vernida, but she kept another important appointment. Angela Calabres Barton, her PhD advisor and mentor, arrived in New York that morning with Edna Tan, Junki's close friend and colleague. They were both at Teachers College. All three of them were at Teachers College together. The two professors had come from Michigan for a pre-arranged meeting with Junki, and upon hearing that she was in hospital, they went directly from the airport to her bedside. When they arrived, Junki's blood pressure was falling and her pulse was steady. She was on partial oxygen, breathing mechanically, sedated against pain, unable to speak or open her eyes. Horror-struck, Angie and Edna, sitting on either side of Junki's bed, held her hands and told her something that meant the world to her. They promised to complete the textbook on democratic science teaching, for which Junki had conducted and recorded all field research. Junki acknowledged by pressing Angie's hand. 4 hours later, she was gone. So this story, just like most of things in Junki's life, went into huge decline and then came back out. So Angie and Edna carried out the promise they made to Junki, and this book came out. I'm circulating it. Take a look, but I'll need it back. This book came out a couple of years later in April of 2010, and that's now for science teachers. This is, I won't say it's recommended reading. It's not, but many science teachers use this as required text. So that was a sort of summary of the drive and passion and resilience that Junki had. And as I started to write this book, I started to wonder, where did all this come from? This working with disadvantaged children, science education, this passion to, as she got sicker, she became more productive until the last couple of years were like, as I've called it in the book, like a starburst. She just went and went and went and exploded. So I started to talk to a lot of people in anticipation of this book. I did about 100+ interviews. And the strange outcome of that was all this regard for US kids in inner cities of America came from a place called Russia, which is, and so, let's see. Yeah. So the story then goes back from here to a very different place. Now, here is a 16-year-old Junki. She's a second year, she's a junior at Stanford University. And she was really excited about going to Russia and about Russia itself through Condoleezza Rice, who at that time was a professor and provost at Stanford University before she joined the Bush administration. She very graciously agreed to be interviewed after she had come back, finishing the Bush administration when, who came to power? Clinton. And we did the interview. And I began to understand that there's something here that had happened. There was another professor who influenced her planning for what she would, and she didn't just want to go to Russia, she wanted to do something there. And she decided to interview homeless kids in Russia, in St. Petersburg and Moscow, on their access to health care. Now, on the face of it, this was kind of strange because this was an American kid, okay, American, we have an Indian background, but nothing to do with Russia, wanting to go there and work with kids on the ground. The problem was that Russia was very different from what it is now. And it's quite a bit of that is covered in the book. I won't read from it, but it was 1996. And the communism had fallen maybe 2, maybe 3 years before that. Okay, so it was going from communism towards capitalism, but at that point it was no ism. It was complete chaos in Russia. And we didn't know that, Jumki didn't know that. So she went to look at these homeless kids, and where 2 years ago there was 0 homeless kids on the streets of Russia's big cities, in 1996 when she went there, there were 40,000 kids with no services for them, and all either addicted to glue. Glue is something they used to sniff because there was a narcotic. Luckily today, glue manufacturers have removed that narcotic. They were either onto glue or onto other things, and they were all coming from very difficult homes. So she was a 16-year-old, she lost her interpreter, and there was a 15-year-old who became her interpreter, and these 2 kids went into drain pipes behind railway stations, into housing projects, and they interviewed all these kids. So, and in this book there are a lot of experience. She met some really fantastic people, and she did a lot of research, had a lot of experience. She learned Russian to the extent she could read Russian in the original. So the inestimable value of Jumki's work in Russia lay in the volume of data she had collected and in the way she interpreted and presented it. Today, experts acknowledge that her work was the first systemic study of homelessness in modern Russia. So this was really groundbreaking work and something she went into. UNICEF had partially funded her work in 1997. I was impressed with her thesis. So you can take a look at this. This is her bachelor's thesis. It won, well, it's here. Well, it won the best dissertation award for that year at Stanford University. And UNICEF had partially funded her work, and Dr. Gianni Murzi, head of UNICEF's Russia office, actually gave her a job, offered her a job to present her outreach recommendations. Oh, he invited her to go to Geneva, the 16 years, well, she was 18 by then, to go to Geneva, and then offered her a UN job to implement them. Jumki gave the offer long and hard thought. In the end, the stress, the cold, the crime, the menace of bigots, she was actually mistaken as a Chechen. The Chechen war had also broken out at that time. So she had not a double, triple, maybe a quadruple whammy when she went to Russia. Where was I? And drug addiction, the alcoholism, fatalism, entrenched dourness. It is a very kind of a dour place, combined to overwhelm her keenness to carry through something she had started. Jumki reluctantly declined Dr. Murzi's offer. So, and as a footnote, on October 22nd, 2011, as part of the 20th anniversary celebration of, well, she actually worked with the chief of epidemiology in St. Petersburg, and again we're talking 1996, 97. She saw AIDS had just come into the world, and Russia, there was a lot of AIDS there, and she saw that some kids of AIDS moms were coming down with AIDS. So she, for the first time in Russia at least, she identified a link between newborns and moms with the HIV virus positive. And she said we should look into this. And that became a huge, there's something called prevention of mother-to-child transmission, PTMC or something, which became a global problem. And Azad, this epidemiologist, started a huge center which I visited, lilac-colored, multi-storied building called the Mother and Child Center, which was built on her vision of this little teenager. So that building's still there, and at the 15th anniversary of that, they dedicated the part of the building to Jhumki. So then she came back, and so she turned down the, but she was decided in her mind that she would definitely work with kids, work in healthcare delivery, and she had her career plans defined. And this is a Stanford grad. So, she had the best thesis. She had a 4+ average GPA, and she got a job at the largest, biggest healthcare consulting company in America called APM, Applied Practice Management. She got a good offer. She got herself an apartment in San Francisco's Noe Valley, looked right over the city to the Bay Bridge, and she got heels and dresses and went to work. And she hated it. She was not a corporate person. She was assigned to a partner who threw Excel spreadsheets and PowerPoint slides to her at all hours of the day and night. She didn't see a single child or and she stuck it for 6 months. We went on a trip, my wife and I, to Mount Everest base camp. And we got this remarkable, it's there, it's quoted verbatim in the book, 9-page handwritten facts. And Jhumki, you might know that she wrote squiggly little text, and she filled up 9 pages and faxed it to us in Kathmandu, Nepal. And it was a kind of a huge diplomatic coup that she said all the values you've placed in us, in me, and I've looked to the plus side and the minus side and looked at all the options, and I've decided to quit. And when we came back, she had quit. So, but it helped us to understand and finally realize that this is Jhumki in St. Petersburg. That's one of the canals. Did I tell you? No, I did tell you that actually all this stuff in Russia, I actually went back to Russia 14 years later after Jhumki went and met all these people. And a lot of what is in here is, I had to go because that's where the spark came. And you can see where the spark came from. So this is what lead Jhumki to, whenever I was teaching this course at Columbia University, and they asked me one word, what would you say was Jhumki's philosophy or advice she gave? And it's find your passion. Somewhere out there is your passion. Look for it, or it'll find you, and then you'll know what it is. Okay. So, but after this, she took the job, and then she had a huge tragedy in her life, an incredible tragedy. Her life is actually marked with huge tragedies and then pulling herself out and soaring even higher and then having another tragedy and then getting out of it. And there were suicide notes that she sent us. It was that serious. And she had a meltdown in Italy where she tried to get away from all that was surrounding her, but she had a meltdown in a place called Herculaneum. And I was about to get her when she came back. There's a lot of stuff on that. But gradually she pulled herself together, pulled herself out of it. And then she went back to Italy, where she had that meltdown, just to fight it back again. And on her last day of her trip, that trip was to a place called, can anyone recognize this place? No? This is a place called Cinque Terre. And it's a beautiful, I haven't been there, but this is a picture I took from her records. And so Jhumki's last day in Europe was spent in Cinque Terre. And I'm referring to that because she had gone through 6 to 8 months of total turmoil. I mean, I wouldn't imagine what went through her head. And she, on that day, which was May 5th, 1999, she wrote a bravura proclamation that closed the book on 6 months of torment. I like to call it the Cinque Terre Manifesto, and I'll read it to you verbatim. These are from her journals. She had a lot of journals, and she wrote a lot about her teaching, about her reflections on boyfriends, and all kinds of stuff. This is the sound of my voice, the sound of my body, my will, my ability to ponder and struggle and spring back into life to see detachment and self-discipline, to grow from doing my best and being individually successful to inspiring success, creativity, and satisfaction in others, so the things I care about are better achieved. There is a garden to be grown, stories to be told, hands-on activities to be created, a journal to be turned into a scrapbook, coffee to be had with Kritika, her friend, at Prolific Oven, mountains to climb with her cousin Ranga, a coolness and calm and personality to cultivate, an interesting job to be done well, panic to sort through and reduce and overcome, realistic goals to set, an acceptance of sifting through anger and grief and rage and sadness and vulnerability and foolishness and irresponsibility and dependence to be had, to feel these through, accept the reality of these situations and failings, accept that they have happened and how they feel, so the light comes. Be patient and you will have be patient and you will have what you want, a steely center to move through life, a sense of purpose without reaching immortality or special recognition in the universe, wisdom to rest, retreat, feel, and then detach when other people's voices overwhelm. Then wait for my own voice to speak. This is the sound of my voice. And with that, she closed the book, and she went to teach, and she became a teacher, and she went to teach in a school in Palo Alto, California, all women, all girls. And there she realized she wanted to teach quirky stuff, original stuff, advanced stuff. And she started to run into problems because everyone, and if I talk to teachers and educators, they get it, that you have to have Regents exams and you've got to follow a curriculum, and then there are APs, and if you have a junior level class trying to do AP stuff, there are problems. And so she applied to do her PhD at Columbia. So she came to Columbia and she really found her calling. And the introduction to Columbia was very interesting, and I'm going to read a little. It's a chapter called New York, New York. Baba, I'm all right, came an excited and rather loud voice. I took the telephone receiver away from my ear and twisted around to look at the digital clock beside the bed. We were in California at home. It was 6:10 a.m. Our dear daughter had been in New York for a whole week. Surely she should know by now there is a 3-hour time difference between Manhattan and California. With infinite patience, I told her I was happy that things were working out for her. What? Jhumki upped the decibels. Baba, wake up! I decided to count silently to 10. Baba, she yelled. You there? Turn on the TV. Why, what's happened? Turn it on. I fumbled for the remote. Radha stirred on the other side of the bed. Is that Jhumki? She mumbled. Is she okay? Yeah, she's okay. That I know. Where's the silly remote? I turned on the television set. A tower of the World Trade Center was in flames. We sat up in bed and watched the screen for the next 15 hours. So those of you who might have been in New York at the time know this. But 3 months before 9/11, I'd answered a call from a lady in New York who introduced herself as Professor Angela Calabrese Barton. That's Angela. So I took a message. Jhumki was out, and turned out that Angie, as we got to know her, had a big impact on Jhumki's life. Those are her 2 kids. Angie became Jhumki's master's and doctoral advisor and her collaborator after Jhumki finished her PhD. Radha and I met Angie at TC, Teachers College, after Jhumki started at Columbia. Knowing by then about Angie's immense stature in the science education field, I was surprised when Jhumki introduced us to a small, lean woman wearing glasses, sitting jammed into a corner of an office packed with graduate students. As we got to know her through Jhumki's work, I began to appreciate the commitment with which Angie battled injustice in the teaching of students at inner city schools, and the charisma with which she inspired an almost evangelical core of researchers determined to foster change in American pedagogy. Was she a professor, Angie? Yeah. She was? Okay. When she spoke, Angie left everyone in her dust. Her speech was a waterfall of ideas and utterly absorbing, provided one kept up with her. Soon Jumki began to speak that way too. Fast, clear, directed, cogent diction. I learned that Angie was a marathoner and that she and her husband had 2 little girls. They didn't make college professors this way in our time. Our professors were all male and round and pompous and pedantic and didn't know the spelling of fun. Anyway, at Columbia, Jumki started on a teaching project right away. It was NSF funded and concentrated on urban middle school youth. Her research was to focus on development of science literacy through after-school learning and its relationship to issues of culture, power, and equity. Angie gave Jumki a great deal of freedom, which she was missing in California. Okay, how are we doing on time? Okay. Great deal of freedom in setting up a program to interview kids and assess their work through out-of-school program that did not look like an everyday in-school science class. The point of all this is that she had this grant to work at a school which actually had the lowest reading scores in the whole country. And since then the school has been reconstituted and it's been reset up. And so for the program, Jumki developed data for a master's thesis, which was later published in the Journal for Science Teaching. She described the funds of knowledge. That's the important thing. You know, I brought funds of knowledge from Cisco to that, evening at this class, and she started to draw on it and pull me in. So it described funds of knowledge that kids bring with them to science learning and provided an open setting that gives them space to bring those personal experiences into the learning process. Dr. Maria Rivera Malucci, the pictures right here, was science curriculum coordinator and lab director at this school in South Bronx, this school. And here what happened was her career began to surge forward in 2 distinct directions as she started this course. So she found she loved teaching and she wanted to teach all the time. At the same time, she wanted to do research and get her PhD. How does one do both? You can't be a graduate student and a full-time school teacher. So she hit upon this. So the 2 things she wanted to do was the academic rigor of her work at Columbia intensified as she researched ideas, put them to the test, gathered in and analyzed data for a master's thesis at this after-school school. When the after-school program in the South Bronx ended, she took on a full-time science teaching job at the Renaissance Charter School in Queens, managing and inspiring reluctant kids and solving everyday problems, which led to a different set of learnings. And then she applied a masterstroke. She saw the benefits of intertwining these 2 threads so that she could simultaneously live both the activities she had grown to love, teaching and research. And by doing so, she set in motion a path-breaking, data-driven, these are Angie's words, and by doing so, she set in motion a path-breaking, data-driven educational research program that was grounded in the reality of teaching. So she had her subjects of her research on one hand, and then she had a lot of academic journals and colleagues and advisors to mentor her, and she brought the 2 together. Okay, so now, so she was, there's a lot about her finding all the bars in Soho and the music at Lincoln Center. She was a ballet dancer from age 3 to age 15. And she was in her element in New York. And then, it's a very, that she was diagnosed with cancer. At the age of 24, she discovered a lump, and that was tested for as a biopsy, and it came out positive. And anyone else's world would have come crashing down because of, and Jumki became the tower of strength for us during that time. And she went through chemo she went through surgery in California over Christmas, and she went through chemo over here. She wouldn't stay there and be a permanent invalid. And Maria says, and it's recorded here, she missed 1 day of school, both at Columbia and in her school, through 5 months of chemo and add 1 more month for surgery. And she would go around with that, they tried wigs and stuff, and she just loved bandanas. And these are her kids at that Bronx school. And you know, she fit in very, and this was a white one. She had many colors and designs, and she was fine in Harlem. Okay. So then she went to this school at Queens, and this is the Renaissance Charter School. And there she met this guy, Richard Doherty, who was a science teacher. He's not your usual young science teacher. He was a radio engineer, and then he decided to do science teaching. And Jhumki at that time was beginning to understand a lot of the issues surrounding trying to make change in the New York school system. And she was beating her head against all kinds of bureaucratic problems. And you know, inertia among her colleagues at school, the principal, et cetera, et cetera. She had lots of ideas and lots of barriers to her ideas, and she would get frustrated. And they had shared an office in the basement of Renaissance Charter School, and she would come barreling down the steps, wild and angry, and start to throw things, and Richard would let her calm down, and finally started to coach her. Pick your battles, go prepared, see which battles you need to win, and then base what you're saying on data, not on emotion. And she was there for a couple of years, and then that helped her really. Now, that school later on had this robotics program, and Richard he by the way is a SciEd fellow later on, and he's actually got a SciEd badge on him. This robot's called Jhumki, and in a year and a half after Jhumki passed away, Jhumki and Murphy, two robots who teamed up with that school, won the inter-school robotics New York, New Jersey robotics competition. And so they've got Jhumki in a showcase, Jhumki the robot in a showcase in Queens. Okay, so we're going to move through a little quickly now. So then around this time, Jhumki started to get involved in a group. She wanted to start a school. She had wanted to do that right after Stanford. After she decided to become a teacher, she wanted to start a school. Her parents were into this venture capital, startup kind of. Radha and I were in high tech. And she got into this group that was starting a school, and they founded the School for Democracy and Leadership. And these are some of the students. Danya, you're second from left? Yeah. So I'm not sure where you guys took this picture. Sounds like Manhattan. Anyway, we talked about SDL in the video, so I won't get into too much about it. And let's see, I've got my numbering 7, okay. And this is done, 8, yeah. So let me see if I have the picture. So Jhumki started the school in 2004, and she was, let me try to remember, she was co-founder, assistant principal, science education head, science teacher, new teacher mentor. She used to run, what is that place, the consulting or what advisory. And the thing was, all the kids who came into advisory in a particular year wouldn't leave the next year. So Danya, and others, were in her advisory all through. She very, very reluctantly left. She loved teaching here. I mean, it wasn't easy. She was doing her PhD thesis at that time, remember. She was still at Columbia, and we are talking about 2004. And she would wake up at 4 o'clock to prep for the class. Then she would go for a run, and then she would get on the train from here, from Upper West Side. She lived over in 96th Street, to go to Crown Heights in Brooklyn, hour and a half. No problem. She would be hunched over the laptop writing a dissertation, hour and a half, and all around her people would flow and ebb, and then do the same thing on the way back. So by the time she got to work at 8 o'clock, she had done a full day's work for most of us. And so there was that. And she loved teaching. it was pretty, I think her purse was stolen how many times? Like 3 or 4 times. So she started to wear a purse belted to herself. But she wanted to touch many more schools, and that's what convinced, I mean, how NYU convinced her to come to NYU. But she went back for the graduation of this batch. This was the founding of the school with the 9th grade. So this 9th grade became 12th grade and graduated. And at this graduation, now I'll come back to that. In 2000, this is in 2004, and this is in 2008, 4 years later. In between these two, her cancer, which had gone into remission for 5 years, came back as a metastasis. So that was another one of those huge downswings. She pulled herself out of that, and here she is, a keynote speaker. Well, this lady is the councilwoman from Brooklyn, and she gave her talk, and then Jumki spoke, and there was lots of the hats went flying and whistles. And I'm going to, not the whole speech, but a short speech that she gave. Yeah. Right in conclusion of that speech, she says, I think I speak for your teachers and families and mentors when I say that we expect the world of you in the years ahead. We expect you to be scholars, thoughtful parents, responsible partners, good friends to each other, and accomplished scientists, business owners, web designers, activists, and poets. We expect this because we are so proud of you and know how much you can accomplish. We expect you to find your passions and aim for success even when the road is difficult. We do expect you to be a source of positive change in the world. Now, these kids, I call them kids, so they were in 9th grade when they started. We've tracked many of them. Donna's of course here, but there are at least 10 of these kids we've tracked, and all of them are doing fabulously. A lot of that is in the book. So she gave that speech. And then let's see, oh yeah, this is, so we talked about her teaching, and one day after she passed away, I was in her office in NYU, Steinhardt, and there was this, we were cleaning out her office to see what personal things we should take out. And we saw this little, like this little post-it, something like this, stuck to the side of her desk, something like that. And I was about to throw it away when I looked at it, then I looked at it again, then I showed it to my wife, and then we both kind of, and I quickly copied that into my laptop. And that was, and that later on, some of her colleagues said this was what Jumki went by. So you can kind of see that she was, how she was very goal-driven, very evaluative. So, summarizing the academic aspect of Jumki, and then we leave it and move on. The 2 basic pillars of her teaching: democratic pedagogy, so that, and these are, again, I'm not an educationist, so these are ensuring that students' own voices are heard in their teaching, in their learning. And if we can do that, they are drawn into science. This is in a science background. And if a child is drawn into science, then these things happen. Okay, and I'll keep this up for a second if you want to write it down. But this helps kids ask questions, become curious. And if they can become curious about science, they can be curious about the Wall Street Journal or any number of things, and they start to take an interest in education, which is missing today. And then once they start that, it's a lifelong imbuement. And that's this is the fundamental premise on which our foundation is based and the work we do now. So those are the pillars of her teaching. So then we'll come close and give Donnie the stage a little late in just a minute. I can pass this on to you if you. Then as it got later, so this is 2006-ish. This is 2007-8. Then as she started to get sicker, so last year 2008 was pretty hard. She just went like a dynamo, and don't have to read the details, but she published these 5 major papers during that year, those 2 years, She won the Knowles Science Teaching Scholarship, enough to fund 4 graduate students whom she used to supervise. And she taught 2 classes during the semester. And she was writing, and she was going around different schools, about 5 or 6 schools in the New York area, recording observations of her work and in video recording, and her students would compile all that. At the same time, she was undergoing serious chemotherapy. Her hands and legs had pain of neuropathy, and and we were. What happened along the way was she involved us, her wife and my wife and me and Alexander, more the 2 of us in her work, which is why we kind of know her so well. During her Stanford days, parents were like, anyway, so you know what I mean. Okay, so this picture. So she got so ill that she was going to go back to California, and the plan was she would spend some time with us and then see what happens. And she was about to go back to California when her world changed completely, Junki's world. Now we're talking about October 2008. It was a complete surprise and short notice, and the organizer, Dr. Perry Halkitis, contacted Alexander, her husband, just before the weekend, and it was going to be on a Monday, and we were going to leave for California on a Tuesday. To keep it secret, Junki was not shown the official invitation. She was simply told that there was to be a special farewell party and she should dress appropriately. Perhaps she had a premonition. Perhaps she thought it might be her last NYU group function. She was pretty sick. You see her hair's gone because she had gone through chemo and she had gotten very thin. Whatever the reason, she dressed in a formal black suit, white blouse, and good shoes. Coincidentally, it was the same outfit that Alexander had bought for her when she went for her NYU job interview. Mommy convinced her to add a touch of makeup, something she never did. She walked to Pless Hall holding Alexander's hand. Relatives, Vasilis and Anna, Alexander's relatives, several of us fell in behind them. Her eyes widened when we got close to Pless Hall at NYU, and she saw her dearest friends from Castellea School, where she went, Eric, Kritika, and James waiting. "Oh, hell, this must be big," she said. "Baba, what's happening?" More friends, Jeremy, who's here, and Libby Garland joined us as we entered the building together and crammed into the elevator. On the 4th floor, Junki exited to applause. The large common room was now filled with her colleagues and students. Everyone hugged her. Then Junki noticed the provost and did a double take. But before she could say anything, the elevator doors opened with a loud clack, and everyone looked around. It was himself, John Sexton, president of NYU. People who could find seats sat down. Others stood bunched together. Dean Mary Brabeck, you saw her on the video, whose brainchild the event was, introduced Junki and her family. I noticed Junki's smile had become rigid. She was overwhelmed. The provost announced her promotion to associate professor, something extremely rare for an academic of 2 years. Then the Goddard Faculty Fellowship Award, and then her tenure. So everyone gasped. There were loud cheers. President Sexton, that's him on the right, rose to his feet, and the august member of New York society walked over to where Junki was sitting stupefied and went down on his knees. He spoke, but not to Junki, but to Alexander. So Alexander's on Junki's right, and that's her mom on the corner. I liked and respected you, Alexander, before we met, Dr. Sexton told him. Thank you for giving us Junki and for encouraging her genius. President got back on his feet and gave a stirring speech that was laced with humor. Junki hid her face in a jacket in embarrassment. Finally, and there was a lot of speeches, and she was roasted a bit, and it was finally her turn to speak. She stood up hesitantly and faced the crowd. She turned stunned and shaky. She fumbled and dropped the microphone. Alexander came to her rescue and held it for her. I don't have experience in this, Junki said and looked at her mother. Turning to the audience, she added, I don't know what to say. And then she remembered something and pulled out a piece of paper from her jacket pocket. I don't know if it was from before or she had prepared, and read from it. Thank you for gathering with me at such short notice. I don't feel particularly meriting of any kind of honor of this kind. The achievements are entirely due to the ecosystem of staff and students with whom I have been privileged to collaborate. I like my work. I feel my work is just beginning, and she was about to get put out to pasture. I hope to work as best as I can from California at the high level of quality appropriate for this university. Thank you to everyone who organized this, particularly Perry Halkaitis. I hope you enjoy yourselves. But what happened was, we walked out, all of us in that big entourage, to Washington Square Park, and crimson and gold in the fall sunset, Washington Square Park was gleaming when the Basu entourage emerged from Pless Hall and walked the short distance to Junki's apartment. She held on tightly to her mother's arm and did not say anything. But implicit in her action was gratitude for the tenure review dossier. So what happened was Junki was very anxious. Anxiety was bothering her, so she couldn't, and her tenure review was due, and she couldn't write because her fingers were not working on the laptop. So her mom helped her do the dossier for her tenure review, and that resulted in this. Implicit in her action was gratitude for the tenure review dossier that she and Radha had delivered 2 weeks ago. I was walking a few paces behind them when Radha suddenly stopped and hugged her daughter emotionally. She later told me what had made her do this. Mommy, Junki had said in wonder, my work really means something, doesn't it? This realization was to have a momentous impact in a very short time. So I'm going to stop here, and if you read the book, what happened after that was she went to California, and she lasted there just for a week, and she was back. Something happened there which made her run as fast as I can, and she couldn't run because we were all there tightly holding her back. And a week later, she was back in her apartment. And then her health dramatically improved all of a sudden, and that there was 8 weeks of unbelievable for us. She was fading, and she just got better. And I was involved with. She wrote a book chapter. She wrote a book proposal. She had and she just went back to her students, and of course then things went downhill. So that is Junki's life. I might have a few things. This Billy Green story you can read. So the other thing was a wedding. There's quite a bit. A wedding was like Heathrow Airport, because there were people from, her husband was half Greek, half Israeli. And she had a wedding registry, and the one item that was subscribed the most was she had round-trip tickets for one student or one teacher from New York to come to a wedding in Northern California, and that got subscribed first. So all these, so on the back are the students, in front are the teachers from SDL, and they were as much part of her wedding as any of her relatives. And then she brought Dania and 3 other students to San Francisco, and it was the first time ever in a professional conference, I think so, that's what Chris Emdin tells me, that they saw high school kids on stage, and she's going to talk about that. And this is a good cue for Dania. So this is at Dania's graduation. So you're on. I'll come back and talk a little bit about the legacy. Thank you. Oh yeah, sorry. Dania is one of the most soft-spoken people I've met.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Dania Locke. I was one of the founding students of the School for Democracy and Leadership, so I was privileged to have met Ms. Junki then and known her all throughout my high school career and a short amount of my college career. So I met Ms. Junki as a freshman going into high school. I was fairly new to this country as well, yeah. So we had, as the new students, we went to camp. You guys saw a picture there when they had tents and we were playing activities outside. So, you know, as a new school, they had to develop ways for us to get to know each other, get to know the program, and things like that. So yeah, we went to camp, and I was a part of her advisory for the first year, as Mr. Basu mentioned, and it was a big deal because every year we're supposed to switch advisories and advisory instructors, but we petitioned and we fought and we won, and we were able to keep Ms. Jumke for another year. It was funny. So we stayed with Ms. Jumke for 2 years in our advisory class, and we were able to just develop ways to build our school, get people to interact with each other, develop ways to interact with other schools in the building, because it was a big building and there were 4 small schools in the building. So, you know, it was just weird. We couldn't really go on the other floor, so we had to develop like activities and things for us to do, appropriate activities with the other schools. So I was not a fan of science. I wanted to be a lawyer since I was younger. And even before that, I was not a part of Ms. Jumke's science class initially. I was a part of her advisory, not her science class. But, you know, I used to walk in the hallway and I would see smoke coming from her class, from the dry ice experience. And I would see students in the hallway walking the robots. And, you know, I was a little jealous, I have to admit. So I don't even know how I got into Ms. Jumke's science class, but I did get into Ms. Jumke's science class. And from there, I developed my love for science because she incorporated my passion for law into the science class, which is what she always tried to do, because we all learn in different ways, and she tried to bring in our passion into science. So for my personal experience, as I said before, I was interested in law back then. So we sat and we decided, okay, how can we incorporate law into science? So what we decided to do was to create like a mock trial, I would call it. And we created some questions for the class to debate on. We turned the class into a courtroom. I was the judge. We had lawyers and the jury, and we had a blast. Initially,
what was the subject?
The subject was black holes, dark matter, whether or not if things was, you know, sucked into a dark hole, would it be able to come back out? A lot about like cyberspace and things like that. And even in the textbook I have there, like, they have some of the things that we created, like the rules and the trial, what each team would be talking about, etc. So that's in the textbook. So I wasn't too excited about how it turned out. I was excited for me because, you know, it was exciting that I facilitated and helped like create this entire class, and it's so difficult for teachers because they have to do that all the time. But the students, they didn't participate as much as I would have liked, so we tried it again the following year, and it was much more successful than it was the first year. So that was pretty important to me because, you know, I was engaged in the class. I felt like my opinion and my interests mattered in Ms. Jumke's class. She really cared about what we were passionate about and tried to always, you know, involve our passion into her curriculum and her plans for what she wanted to do in class. Yeah. So in Ms. Jumke's science class, we were never lectured. We were never, like, we read from a textbook, but we were never like forced to read books. We did hands-on experiments. We went on field trips, and Mr. Basu was absolutely right. When we were going on field trips, she was on the train on her computer writing her dissertation. So it was amazing to witness, actually. So, and on a personal level, Ms. Jumke really did a lot for me because she helped me become legal in this country because I was on a visa and I was supposed to return back to my country of Jamaica. So she helped me in that part. So even without that, I wouldn't even be able to be where I am right now without, you know, the proper documentation. So she also helped me to get some summer opportunities. She got me into a nanotechnology and a criminal law course here at Columbia during my sophomore year? I believe it was my sophomore or junior year in high school, and that I knew absolutely nothing about nanotechnology. The criminal law I was pretty excited about because that was my passion at the time. But those are really wonderful experiences for me. And at the end, I was able to participate in the mock trial versus NYU. NYU won, but it was okay because it was nice. I also had, and Ms. Junki, not only she became more than a teacher to us, and if we had problems, we always we had the opportunity. I'm getting emotional now. Sorry. We were always able to go talk to her. I also had the opportunity to travel with her to California, like Mr. Basu said. Sorry.
I remember meeting
So I went to California with her. I spoke with her with 3 other students when she was giving her presentation for her PhD. And that was, we felt so important because, like he said, we were the first time students ever came to that presentation. So we were pretty popular that week. We were pretty popular that weekend. So yeah, I felt proud to be a part of her work. I am a testimony that her passion was real, and my success was because of Ms. Junki. So now, I'm so sorry. So, that's a picture from Lehman. I graduated with my BSW, and I attained my MSW from Columbia University School of Social Work just this last year. And now I work as a social worker, or my real title is a healthcare integrator at Abbott House in Irvington, New York. So I'm doing pretty well. Yeah. I think that's it. Sorry.
So Dania is our inspiration for as much as Junki, Dania and Neil and Ashton and Gedison and Rashida. All of these kids are now, oh, that goes here. This goes here. So this is the final part, and I'll go through this quickly. We can probably have some questions. So after Junki passed away, it took us a while to recover, but one of the first things we did was set up a foundation because there was a huge outpouring of grief. We got emails, letters, cards, all kinds of things saying that her work cannot stop. She's left this big hole in the science education community. And so we started we did a name brainstorming and stuff. And we're actually changing that to STEM Ed now because how things have changed. 100K in 10 is a movement of 100,000 science teachers in 10 years. It's a President Obama level activity in which both Barnard and we, JBF, are in. NYU is also in there. So we built on Junki's idea, and it's not Radha and me, but there's a whole number of now science teachers who form this movement. And we all believe that if we can develop science teachers like Junki, or STEM teachers today, and who adopt democratic teaching, which is what is taught, so it's a fellowship. If they use the democratic skills, give the students their views and have it included in that, then they do well and they become responsible citizens. So we do that by providing a transformational learning experience to teachers, and we'll talk about how. And thereby, they can motivate more and more kids to get into science and become responsible citizens, not necessarily scientists. You know, Donia is doing great, but she's not a scientist. And I don't think she's any less because of that. So there are several parts of what the SciEd Innovators movement. So the flagship one is this fellowship program that we started in 2010. And it's a one-year program, and these are all fellows who are all science teachers from underserved schools of New York. And they, over a year, they participate in one workshop a month, and then there is a summer workshop. And it's a design-based, it's creativity-based education, and a lot of technology and teaching skills are created. We're into our 4th cohort this year, which is coming to a close. And we've now touched 60 public schools in America, in New York. Yeah. So we use this thing called Windows into Classrooms, and I will give you an example. It's how these fellows show how they're applying democratic teaching in their classrooms in a way that others can critique it and
I teach an elective 11th grade science course at a high school in Brooklyn, and this year implementation of the Common Core has been tailored to semesters. Winter, mandated by my science department, I administered a humanities-derived EYO assessment. A lot of text, a lot of writing, a lot of textual evidence and interpretation. Results, students struggle to cite appropriate evidence for their claims and their scientific explanations. More than half of my students overall were grade level.
It's about 6 minutes.
More than 3/4 of my students that were LRI lack this skill. The problem for me was that this kind of assessment really equates content with skills. The idea that you can read a long essay or write a long essay, and in doing that learn the skill of reading and writing a long essay just isn't very effective for most of my students. In fact, I give students the task of learning both content and skills at the same time. It's scary. Content is kind of like this big ocean, and if students are doing both of these things at the same time, skills end up kind of floating precariously on the surface, lost at sea, say, it makes more sense to separate the two. It makes more sense to use content as the context for learning skills, and once skills are mastered, allowing students to use those skills to really master that content. And thinking about this idea and student strengths and speaking and visualizing, I got a kingdom of problem practice. And it is how mathematical DSP tools, spoken narrative,
Democratic Science Teaching Framework.
Critical scientific literacy, and essentially moving away from writing to improve writing. And my solution was inspired by infographics. What is an infographic? Well, it's really a fancy diagram that makes a claim or explanation or argument with information and graphics. So here's an infographic about the pH scale, and here's one that is explaining why traffic happens on the freeway. So for the spring EYO, students had to make one of these infographics around neurovalues content they had mastered. They worked with small research teams to create their product. And I made a few teacher moves that I think helped this project to be successful. The first was just getting students to understand that stories work the same way in writing and speaking. Leveraging that strength in speaking, I had students look at infographics for personal interest and analyze the narrative structure. They talked about the structure in their research teams, recorded responses in writing, and then they developed a series of questions and asked each other, based on this analysis, to develop stories for their own infographics. Second one I made was just having students.
So I'm going to stop this here.
They don't do the humanities style EYO. And this is especially important because.
So the wicks are, sorry. So these are our, so each student, each fellow, and there's a day we invite people from the community, educational and student communities, and this make a big deal, and we get feedback on their work. And these are now, we've got a library of them, and now, so that's Windows into Classrooms. Master Fellows have completed 1 year of fellowship, and then they come back, and they're a small number. We have about 25 regular fellows every year, about 3 or 4 master fellows, and not all of these are masters. She is, Susie is, Dan. Dan is, this is the guy who's one you just looked at. And so they become coaches to new fellows, and we ultimately are building them into teacher leaders. And so that's the Master Fellows program. And ultimately we see them going out and starting another program, say at Columbia or at Barnard, or in Chicago or in Baltimore, and taking the movement forward. So again, this is basing on Junki's original vision. It's getting into today's teaching environments. And we run this expo every year. You saw the video of the expo. Jane Goodall came to the 2011 expo, and this year we expect at least 600 or 700 people to come and visit. There are about 75 schools. Each one has a desk and about 5 or 6 students each. So you can do the math. There's a whole mass of students all having a good time. So looking ahead, well, we talked about a lot of this. Make our WICS public, let people look at it, and help science teachers around the country, around the world. And so this is the last item I want to cover, which was a huge event, at least for us, and it's a big event. So Junki's work is now enshrined, in addition to in Columbia University as the Early Career Award. This is at NYU. Steinhardt has renamed their entire science education department and labs and everything under one roof, called the STEMI Education Center. It's now called the Junki Center for short. And this is the inauguration. It's a beautiful floor with labs in the middle and the faculty offices and conference rooms around the sides. In fact, one conference room looks right down at the apartment where she lived. That's by accident, not by design. And it's now making waves. There are joint programs going on with New Zealand and United Arab Emirates and whatnot. And we are really, and a lot of the memorabilia is in there. So I think that's all I had to talk about today. I'd be happy to take questions and hope to leave you with an inspirational story.
Just, he does have copies of the books available.
Yeah, copies. We have a $10 educational event discount, so take your copy. I'd be happy to sign it. It's been on the market for a while, but it's evergreen, I hope. So you can ask Donnie or me.
Questions? That's a lot to take in.
Yeah, I know. I wasn't sure what exactly you have in your colloquium, but I thought I'd just cover her story and Donia's story and her legacy. Well, it's been great coming to see you, and I hope all of you have great careers, find your passion, and go on from there. Okay, thanks.
So I think, for me, it's just been great. I heard various parts of the story, and now, the story keeps getting longer, and that's one of the things that I love about it, So, like the whole tail end of the videotape I hadn't seen, just where the work was done. It's pretty amazing. And so, I think that the key thing is that, it always was about the students. And if there's one, take-home message, it's that piece, it's about the students. And you see her in this group, and she would be in a group, but she would have a way to focus on, each one as an individual, and for them to know that while they're in that group, that she knows who I am, and she's, I'm here, I'm present. Just this ability to be really fully present, and I think those are things that as an educator are crucial, and so easy to overlook.
Yeah. Donia can verify for that. She actually, Helen Dole, who was one of her colleagues, she was a new teacher at STL when it started. Junki had at least like 3 years experience. And Helen describes her advisory as students coming in and out, stuff happening, 2 or 3 laptops going, new teachers coming in crying, and she has a lot of other things. But each one she talked to had the feeling that she's completely focused on you. on her or him. And that was it. And you would walk down the and say, hi, and you'd ask her, no, she'd ask you, hi, what's up? And then she'd look straight at you like she really wants to know what's up. Or how are you? She really wants to know how you are. And that people found that unnerving, because you're saying,
Her first, her master's thesis was on, students' sustained interest in science. And, like how do you, like her interest in their sustained interest was because they were her sustained interest. It was just like understanding them and how to motivate and engage kids in lifelong, science interest and learning. So.
Yeah, her foundation's website, I didn't put it up, is jumkibasu.org. So a lot of stuff there for you to learn about.
Well, thank you so much.
Thanks, Maria. Thank you.